Shalom everybody, and welcome back with insights on the Parsha of the week, Parshat VaEtchanan, which is also Shabbat and Nachamu, and we should have the merit of having a consolation for the destruction of the temple, for the wars that we're going through, the pogroms, the death of Tzaddikim, the concealment of true guidance and true light of the Tzaddikim, which is the main impediment blocking us from coming back to Hashem, that we don't know who to turn to, we don't know where to go, we don't know what to do. In the Parashah, we have a repetition of the Ten Commandments. And the big question is why? Why need repetition? Why couldn't the Torah just say, and Moshe Rabeinu reviewed again the Torah, because it is called Mishneh Torah. The whole book of Dvarim is called the Mishneh Torah because it's like it's a repetition before Moshe Rabeinu leaves the Jewish people and they go on to enter the Holy Land. But we know that many new laws are brought down in Dvarim which are not brought down anywhere else. More details, okay? So like the law is also that it's brought down in the commentaries and in Chazal that the repetition of the Ten Commandments is to teach something new when there's a change. So for example, the very famous difference between what's the Ten Commandments brought down in Parshat Yitro as opposed to this week's Parshat VaEtchanan is the word Zakhor et Yom Shabbat lekadesho. That's what's written in Parshat Yitro. Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. And in this week's Parashah it says Shamor et Yom Shabbat lekadesho. Guard, safeguard, keep the Holy Sabbath to sanctify it. Okay? So the question is still, why the need to review? Just let the Torah say, and Moshe Rabeinu reviewed the Torah, including the Ten Commandments. But why does the Torah have to go again in detail to repeat the Ten Commandments? Okay, there's one change, one or two changes. One Rashi points out on Zakhor and Shamor, like we mentioned. But just mention that then. Why all the Ten Commandments mentioned again? What's going on here? Okay? On a deeper level, we see, Rav Nosson also goes into this in several places in the Likutey Moharan, that the only way to connect to the true holiness of the Holy Land, the only way to enter the Holy Land is with supernatural energy, supernatural help. This supernatural help and energy is called the Keter in the Kabbalah. The Keter, which is above the 10 Sfirot, it's above the 10 Sfirot, 10 Sfirot being the levels of energy that Hashem uses in creation. Keter is way above that. It corresponds to that which is Pele, wondrous. Anything which is wondrous beyond comprehension, beyond understanding, that's the level of the Keter. To enter the Holy Land, the Jews need to activate that merit to be able to go in, even though they're undeserving, which for sure was the case with the Jewish people in the desert. First of all, the generation of the Meraglim, they all died in the 40 days, the 40 years in the desert. But even the children who afterwards reached the proper age, they also had problems. If you remember, there was the incident with Korach, there was the incident with Zimri, okay, there was the slander and that they were bitten by the snakes. There were problems still amongst the Jewish people even after the 40 years, the generation of the desert passed on. So they weren't 100%. They weren't 100%. As great as they were, and they for sure were big outstanding tzaddikim compared to us, but they weren't 100%, and it wasn't enough to bring them to the Holy Land. What was needed to bring them into the Holy Land is the power of the Keter, the power of the Pele, because the whole holiness of the Holy Land is supernatural. It's a wonder. It's a Pele, okay? And the way to enter is activating the concept of the Keter. Now the Keter, the Kabbalah teaches, corresponds to the number 20. Hence, the word Keter, crown, in Hebrew, begins with the letter Kaf. The letter Kaf has the numerical value of 20, okay? What's the idea of 20? So the idea of 20 is that the Keter, being untouchable, unfathomable, yet being the interface level between Hashem, the infinite one, and Hashem's infinite light, to the creation. So being that, it's like an interface, it's used by Hashem as the channel to channel through to this world energy. So they explain, the Kabbalists, that how the Keter works is that it descends all the 10 Sfirot from the top to bottom Chochma bin Adat, Chesed Gvur Tiferet, Netzach Hod Yesod Malchut, but doesn't stay there. It goes right back up. So it passes through all 10 sfirot twice. 10 plus 10 equals 20. And that's the idea of Keter, beginning with the letter Kaf, signifying the concept of the number of 20. Okay? With that in mind, we can understand why the 10 Commandments were repeated. Once the actual story in Parshat Yitro, where we're being told of what actually happened, that the Jews were receiving the Torah. That was the initial experience of the 10 Commandments, the Aseret HaDibrot. And then in this week's Parashah, where Moshe Rabeinu is revising, he's going over again the 10 Commandments, okay, but with a slight change, like we said, on Shabbat. Okay? What's going on? The first experience of the Jewish people, experiencing the intense light of the 10 Commandments, so intense that, like we're taught, Rashi brings it down, is that when the Jews heard the opening 2 commandments of the 10 Commandments, the wording of Chazal, Parcha Nishmatam, their souls departed, okay, because it was so intense, they couldn't handle it. Their souls left their bodies. Angels had to come to bring back the souls back into their bodies. And Moshe Rabeinu had to review with the Jewish people the remaining 8. They did hear, technically, some opinions say all 10, first 2, whatever. The thing is, it was too intense. That was the idea of the 10 Commandments mentioned in Parshat Yitro. But because it's so intense, the Jews were destined to fall. Because Keter, to reach the Keter, you need 20. So the original initial 10 Commandments revealed in Parshat Yitro was the Jewish experience to ascend, to bump into the Keter. To explain how experiencing Keter takes place is that when a person finally reaches exposure to the level of Keter, it doesn't stop there. The person is bounced back. There's what's called a betisha, a bounce, a smashing backwards. And only once a person is smashed back all the way down. So he starts off, Rabbi Nachman explains in lesson 24, the person starts off by doing mitzvot with joy, b'simcha. He goes up from level to level, going up from the lowest level, malchut, all the way up to the highest levels called chochma bin adat, reaching the keter. But now, to experience the light of the Keter, which is what's beyond it, which is the infinite light, the Keter itself pushes a person back, and he goes down all the way down past Malchut. So therefore, he has to go up again a second time, and that's the idea of 10 and 10. He goes down, he bumps into the Keter initially, he's pushed down. Once he's pushed down, then the Keter shines into this person, the infinite light, and thus allows him to reconnect to the Keter and reaching higher levels, okay? So it's like a 10, up experience and then a down. So with that in mind, take a look closely. In the 10 commandments of Parshat Yitro, on the commandment of Shabbat, the word used was, like we said earlier, Zakhor, to remember. Remember the day of Shabbat. And in this week's Parashah VaEtchanan, it says Shamor, to guard and to keep. What's the idea here? First, we need to explain why Shabbat. Why all the 10 commandments that Hashem choose to make a big differentiation, which is noticeable that Rashi has to go out of his way to pinpoint it. You can point out other variations with like an extra letter, an extra word, but here there's like a big change, and Rashi points it out in this week's parsha, and that's it. It's on Zakhor v'Shamor. And he says, Rashi's famous saying, Zakhor v'Shamor b'dibur echad ne'emru. Zakhor and Shamor were said simultaneously, something which is humanly impossible, that Zakhor and Shamor were together, okay? But why Shabbat? So the Zohar teaches, and Rabbi Nachman goes into this a lot, and Rav Nosson goes into this a lot, that the concept of Shabbat is the concept of the Tzaddik. Like the Zohar says, when Rabbi Shimon was about to pass on, or when he revealed one of his biggest revelations in the Idra, it's called the Idra, so the students of Rabbi Shimon, being overwhelmed by the revelations he was giving over, they said, praising Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Ant hu Shabbat, dechulehu yomei. You are like Shabbat, that is total light, total day. There's so much light in you, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you're like Shabbat. So from this is learned to equate the holiness of Shabbat to the holiness of Tzaddikim. And it's a common theme in Hasidic teachings in general, and especially by Rabbi Nachman's teachings, that the Tzaddik equals the holiness of Shabbat. That means tzaddikim, they have this light of Shabbat. Just like every Jew has some minimal connection and light on Shabbos at his Shabbos table Friday night, in the Shabbos davening, whatever. Everyone has that time in Shabbat where they feel that light, whether you like it or not, right? So the tzaddikim have a similar light. That's why it's such a big thing to have a tzaddik in your life, to shine you the light of Shabbat, not just on the seventh day, but 24/7, to have the light of tzaddikim shining into you, a similar light to Shabbat. That's why you need a tzaddik in your life. The Zohar says that. The Zohar equates Shabbat to tzaddikim. They said, you are Shabbat. You, Rabbi Shimon, are Shabbat, period, okay? So of the 10 commandments, the difference is specifically in Shabbat. Why? If we say Moshe Rabeinu is like Shabbat also, if Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is called Shabbat, all the more so Moshe Rabeinu is called Shabbat. Moshe Rabeinu in this week's Parashah, he's the one who reviews the 10 commandments. In Parshat Yitro, we see Hashem talking. Hashem is revealing the 10 commandments at Har Sinai. In this week's Parashah, Moshe Rabeinu himself is revising it. What's going on is that the Jews in Parshat Yitro, having after that experience, they crashed. The big crash being the golden calf. 40 days after the revelation at Har Sinai, they had a major crash, meaning they were being pushed back and they were being tested and they fell. The Jews fell super low. Okay? So when you're pushed away, what can you do? What's the only thing you can do is to remember the experience. So for that, the word Zakhor was used in Parshat Yitro by the initial revelation of 10 commandments. The Torah said, remember. Why is the Torah telling you remember? I'm not even there yet. I'm now receiving the Torah. We're going to receive now exclusively the powerful force Shabbat Kodesh of all the laws. It says, Shabbat b'mara nitztava. The Jews, in truth, they already received the laws of Shabbat before reaching Har Sinai at a place called Mara, where Moshe Rabeinu had to sweeten the bitter waters. And that's when Rashi says, quoting the Gemara, the Jews were given the laws of Shabbat. But it was like officiated at Har Sinai. At the receiving, when the Jews entered the actual covenant with God at Har Sinai, that's when Shabbat was actually official, okay? So the Jews, what do they have yet that the Torah is telling to remember? Hashem is warning them, remember, you're going to be pushed back. And all you can have is just to remember. Remember the light of Shabbat, which is the light of the tzaddikim. The light that you're going to experience now at Har Sinai, it's all going to stay with you. It's going to be taken away, which is actually what happened. They were pushed down with the golden calf, etc. So the Jews, all they can do is to remember the experience. So the word Zakhor is used in the initial 10 commandments and by Shabbat, because that light of Shabbat, which is the light of the tzaddikim, we're going to see now, I'll explain now the next. This was taken away. And why now in this week's Parsha, Moshe Rabeinu, who is the tzaddik like Shabbat, he's the one giving over the 10 commandments as if he's giving over that light of the oath given at Har Sinai. He's now reiterating it, but with a force that the Jews now have it in their hands. That's why in this week's Parsha, the word used is Shamor. You have it now in your hands, so you got to watch it. Shamor, Shmira. When do you have security? When you have something to guard. Security is when there's something to keep secure. If you have a safe, so you put security around it, okay? So this week's Parsha says Shamor, because now it's internalized. How is it internalized? Because Moshe Rabeinu, who for sure was untainted himself at the 10 Commandments, he received it fully. He didn't blemish the golden calf. On one hand, being a leader, like the Torah says, red, Kishichet amecha, Moshe Rabeinu, you have to go down a level, because the whole greatness of you is only because of the Jewish people. If now they're tainted because of the golden calf, of what value is your high level? So you're also pushed down. So Moshe Rabeinu, yes, in a sense, is affected by the blemishes of Am Yisrael, but he in himself is pure and holy. So he's the one capable of re-giving, unbelievable, re-giving the 10 Commandments, which is this week's Parashah, and it's coming from Moshe Rabeinu. He's reviewing. It's not like we received the Torah a second time at Har Sinai. No, the Parashah of VaEtchanan is reviewing history, but Moshe Rabeinu is doing it. He's reviewing the 10 Commandments as if now the energy is coming from him. So because of that, the word Shamor is used instead of Zakhor, because now it's internalized, and Moshe Rabeinu is saying to the Jewish people, you're now about to enter the land with this light that I'm giving over to you, so Shamor, now you have to guard it. Originally, Zakhor, all you can do is just remember, you had that bliss, that light of the Ten Commandments, of the commandment of keeping Shabbat, which is like equating the light of the tzaddikim, and it was taken away. So all you can do is to remember Zakhor. I remember something like that. I was once there. It was taken away. So all I can do is to remember that experience. Now in this week's Parashah, Moshe Rabeinu is giving it over, giving the Jews the light of the Ten Commandments. Okay, and in this is Shmirah. So now with that we have 10 Parshat Yitro, and the 10 in this week's Parashah, equating to 20, meaning that now if Moshe Rabeinu reprocessing, representing the 10 Commandments, so in that he's completing the process of the Keter to get to the number 20, which is the Kaf, which is the Keter. So the Jews now can enter the Holy Land with the light of Keter. Meaning what? That no matter what setbacks they'll have from this point on, they can always reconnect. That's the power of the Keter, which is why Keter has the same letters as Karet. Karet means excision, one of the worst punishments. There's certain transgressions in the Torah that when a Jew does them, unfortunately, especially sexual transgressions, a person is punished with what's called karet, excision. Karet means a shortening of one's days. Or in this world, where his life is cut short, or he has his children dying, he has no children, he leaves this world without children, or he lives a full life in this world, but he gets to the world to come and it's cut off, it's taken away, God forbid. So karet, kaf resh tav, and keter, kaf tav resh, the same letters, meaning that only with the light of Keter can a Jew who's fallen so off, so low, where he's, God forbid, liable karet 1,000,000 times already, he's liable the penalty of karet so many times in life because of what he's done, still, with the power of the Keter, he can always come back. That's the power of tshuva. The power of tshuva emanating from the Keter, which was why it was so important for Moshe Rabeinu to revise the 10 Commandments, to get it to be 10 plus 10, the 10 that they fell back, and now the 10 that they come back, and they're with that about to enter the land, the Holy Land. So to make sure to instill the Jewish people have the light of the Keter, Moshe Rabeinu went over the 10 Commandments once more, and again with the word Shamor, because now it's a part of them. With Moshe Rabbeinu's revising the 10 Commandments, he was able to internalize it into them. That's why he uses the word Shamor. It's inside, now you have to guard it. To guard the light of Shabbat and the light of the Tzaddikim. Which also means that no matter how low a Jew falls, if he holds on to Shabbat and or the Tzaddikim, there's always hope. But if he, God forbid, leaves the Tzaddikim and or Shabbat, so then there's karet, chas v'shalom, there's excision. The hope for karet, to turn it to keter, is specifically the light of Shabbat and the light of Tzaddikim, which is again why the differentiation is pointed out dafka in the commandment of Shabbat. So with that, we wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Nachamu. May the Tzaddikim console us. May Shabbat be a consolation. And with that, to bring Mashiach, the light of Tisha B'Av begins, in other words, the light of the morning that we did on Tisha B'Av begins to manifest on Shabbat Nachamu and comes out more fully on Tu B'Av. Bezrat Hashem. Shabbat Shalom U'Mevorach.